Okay, so we will get started as we have a pretty packed agenda for this afternoon. So good afternoon all, and welcome to the Hiring and Onboarding Peer Support Services Providers webinar. I'm Yvette Kelly, the co-director of PeerTech, and today I'm joined by several of my colleagues from McSilver, along with my partner and co-director, Rita Cronice from the Academy of Peer Services, who will introduce herself shortly. We also have a number of presenters today who will be sharing their expertise and knowledge related to our topic area. And so I definitely would like to thank them in advance for their time and for taking the opportunity to share with all of us in terms of their expertise related to the hiring and onboarding of peer workers. So thank you for that. For those of you who have joined us previously, we'd like to welcome you back. And for those of you who are newly joining us, we just want to say welcome. We're happy to have you. And just to say that you've joined our PeerTech webinar, and PeerTech is an initiative that has been established with funding through OMH to facilitate the inclusion of peer support services in mental health settings. And so our role here is really to provide training and technical assistance to support that transition and inclusion. So. Angela, can you move I'm sorry about that. Do apologize. Okay, so we appreciate everyone taking the time to join us today, and we hope that you find the information presented here helpful and informative to your role. As we like to know who has joined us, we are going to ask that you take just a few minutes to complete the poll question by letting us know in what capacity you've joined us by indicating your primary role. We'll give you a few minutes to do so. So if you can just take a few minutes to do that, that would be helpful. And as we wait for responses to come in, I just want to mention that our presentation today is being recorded, and the slides and recording will be made available and posted to our page, peertech.org. You'll also be able to access the slides and recording there within 2 to 3 days. And I also want to encourage you to chat at any questions that you may have for the presenters. And if time allows, we'll take a few questions at the end of today's presentation. But in the event that we run out of time today, we want to encourage all of you to join us for our consultation call, which is scheduled for next week, where participants will have the opportunity to ask our presenters any outstanding questions that you have. So again, if you would like to join us, please feel free to sign up for our consultation call on our page, peertech.org. Okay. So it looks like we have our results in from our poll, and thank you guys again for completing the poll. So it looks like we have a little bit of everyone on the call today, with a majority of folks coming from our clinic leadership. But we also have a number of supervisors on the call, as well as peer specialists and advocates and others. And so thank you all for joining us. It is helpful for us to know who is joining us and who is finding this information helpful. So thank you. Okay, and so just again to reiterate our mission, our charge and goal for PeerTech is really to deliver training, technical assistance, and consultation to mental health organizations serving people across the lifespan, including children, youth, families, adults, and older adults living with mental health conditions. But right now we have a targeted focus on the expansion of peer support services within the mental health outpatient treatment and rehabilitative services programs. And so again, we're happy that all of you can join us. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Rita.
Thank you so much, Yvette. So I'm Rita Cronice, and I just wanted to mention that I'm a person who has successfully managed a major mental health condition for over 20 years, and peer support has been a major part of my recovery in my life. And I'm really honored to be able to give back something to the field of peer support in my new role as co-director of PeerTech. PeerTech is a partnership between the Academy of Peer Services, which is managed by Rutgers University, and the Community Technical Assistance Center at McSilver Institute on Poverty, Policy, and Research at New York University. We're also partnering with Families Together in New York State. They have created many opportunities for the family peer and youth peer advocate series. And over at the Academy of Peer Services, we work primarily with the adult mental health system. And I really want to acknowledge so many of our wonderful partners at Baltic Street, at Liberty Resources, at Hallie, at NIAPRS, at People USA, at Crestwood, at the Wellness Collaborative New York Independent Practice Association, and the New York Peer Specialist Certification Board. So our objectives for today: we'll be able to recall strategies for recruiting and hiring, recognize the credentials and certifications that are required that qualify people as applicants, identify toolkit elements that can be helpful in hiring and onboarding, hiring decisions and onboarding, locate more resources to orient new staff and new hires and other staff, and recall recruiting strategies and consider the benefits of contracting with outside organizations for peer support services and supervision. What our agenda looks like today is we're going to start by talking about strategies for recruiting, hiring, and onboarding. And for the adult peer specialists, we'll have Emily Childress and M. Wasserman, who will be talking about that whole category. Then we'll move on to family peer advocates. That's Carrie Ann Rollier, and youth peer advocates is Robbie Lettieri. And they will also be talking about some wonderful hiring toolkits that they've developed for the youth and family peer advocates. We'll also be talking about recruiting and contracting for services with Cameron Farish at Liberty Resources, peer-run organizations with Rebecca Ivansky and David Ruiz. And I'll talk a little bit about internships on behalf of the Hands Across Long Island group. So we'll also have a little bit of a look at what's coming for next week. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Emily Childress.
Thank you, Rita. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Emily Childress from NIAPRS, the New York Association of Psychiatric Rehabilitation Services, and I am their director for the Core Peer Navigator project. I am also an individual with lived experience in recovery. My background has spanned everything from the policy and advocacy side to providing direct peer services. And first, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the current project that I am the director for. NIAPRS just launched in January a Peer Navigator project. Peer navigation is kind of being defined as we go, but it's definitely a skill set that peers have used as one of the services or supports that they provide to individuals. With that being that they assist individuals in navigating the mental health or substance use system of services. So what we are doing at NIAPRS is utilizing peers to assist individuals in navigating specifically to community-oriented recovery and empowerment services through OMH. And how we do that is we have a toll-free 800 Peer Navigator line that is answered by individuals with lived experience, who then gather some information and connect the individual to a peer navigator in their region with knowledge of the core services as well as home and community-based services. And our peer navigators support the individual through identifying goals, what services would be appropriate, and helping them reach their goals. And they assist them through the referral process and beginning that engagement in services. So really, our purpose is to have more of a short-term peer relationship with the individual with the hopes of getting them connected to services that'll really meet their needs. So with the launch of this project, I have just recently brought on almost 20 staff. So I'm here to share some of the practices that I have used. I also previously ran a crisis respite house where throughout the operation while I was the director there, I onboarded probably close to 24 staff. So just kind of the high level tips for each of these sections. For recruiting, really keeping all options open. And with that, I mean, not discounting anyone for what their work history may be at this point in time. I recently just hired on a dental hygienist, a woman who had been working as a dental hygienist for 15 years. But it's not discounting purely based off of looking at that resume. It's really going to be important to look at the whole individual when making these decisions. Recruiting through peer networks, such as APS. I know through the Academy of Peer Services, we had our openings listed on the job bank. There's a lot of different groups throughout the state, regional groups that do networking and learning collaboratives, making those connections and where individuals with lived experience are gathering already. My biggest tip for hiring would be the interview process goes both ways. A lot of peers want to make sure before they accept a position that they're going to be working for a program and an organization that values the role of the peer, understands the role of the peer, and will be supporting them throughout their employment there. So, we always say, or advise when we're interviewing for a job that we're also making that decision if we want to work for that agency. This is very true when hiring peers. For onboarding, the transparency and thoroughness are key. Transparency really helps to build all relationships, whether it's in a employment and supervisory role or a peer support role even, is really being clear about job expectations, role clarity, handbook, policies and procedures. What are the expectations of this individual and the role? What can they expect from the agency or the program? And then a thoroughness in making sure that all information is shared, processes are clear, handbook is clear, and the training process is as thorough as it can be. For retaining, this is really going to roll into the next webinar from Peer TAC is really, and the following one even after that. Supervision and the work culture are really going to play a factor in retaining peers in the workplace. And I really want to highlight the immersion over inclusion. We always talk about including peers at the table, having them a part of the interdisciplinary team, but it's not about inclusion, but really providing the opportunity for them to be immersed in the decision-making and an active part of the decision-making. And at this point, I will turn it over to my colleague, Em.
Hello all, thank you. My name is Em Wasserman. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. And I'm coming to you today with my role as the Certification Board Coordinator at the Mental Health Empowerment Project. I'm also an OMH trainer there and a student. So I want to talk to you today about verifying candidate qualifications for that overall onboarding, retention, all of that fun stuff. So what that involves is credentialing. Training and credentialing to be specific. So the adult peer specialist credential incorporates 3 separate entities: the Academy of Peer Services, which is the training platform that offers our free coursework towards certification; the New York Certification Board, which offers free NYCPS and NYCPS-P certification to those who meet the requirements, and I'll go into what those acronyms mean in a little bit; and MHOTRS. MHOTRS offers training and support to the courses offered by the Academy of Peer Services. We also offer training and technical assistance to programs, and we provide administrative support to the board, which is a separate entity from MHOTRS. So what is certification? It identifies the minimum standards for training and experience, promoting a skilled workforce, and identifies professionals who are specialists in their field. This certification is designed to recognize the skills and experience acquired by peers, qualifying them to support others in their recovery journey. But it doesn't stop there. So what does that mean? Peer certification became a necessary part of delivering peer services because it's required to deliver Medicaid reimbursable peer support services. Certification requires documentation of a person's education, training, and work experience. Programs that are utilizing certified professionals to provide peer support services may be qualified to bill Medicaid. This is a really important caveat because our certification is current for 2 years, and every certified professional must renew their certification. So if your certification lapses or expires, that professional is not qualified to bill Medicaid. So this is a really important aspect of the certification process. And by becoming a New York certified peer specialist, you are recognized as a qualified professional working with people to support them based on the shared experience paradigm. So there are 2 certifications. I said I would go over those acronyms. NYCPS is the New York Certified Peer Specialist. This requires documentation of 2,000 hours of work experience in addition to your education, which is a high school diploma or equivalency, the completion of core courses based on the Academy of Peer Services, and your 2,000 hours of work experience. There is another provisional certification, the NYCPS-P. It does not require documentation of any work experience. Both are professional certifications, and you can always contact us with questions about what certification is right for you. What makes a candidate qualified? So both of these NYCPS and NYCPS-P provide a person a certificate with a New York Peer Specialist Certification Board number. Both individuals are eligible to provide Medicaid billable services. So the only difference is the documented work experience that someone was able to provide. So both individuals would be able to provide the same services. And again, if you have questions, you're welcome to contact the board. I can put more information in the chat, but NYPSCB@mhepinc.org. All right, and if a candidate is not yet certified, they can download the application on our website. It's pretty simple. NYPeerSpecialist.org has all of our information there. You can download the application. If you have questions about your certification status, whether you meet the requirements, all of the information is on our applications. So again, you must meet all standards for certification, complete the NYCPS or NYCPS-P application, and submit it with all required documentation. You also must read and agree to abide by the Code of Ethical Conduct and Disciplinary Procedure. So if you have any questions, we're here to support you. You can contact us. Our information is right here, nypeerspecialist.org. And again, my name is Em. I'm going to pass it on over to my colleague, Robbie Lettieri.
Thanks, Em. Hey, everybody. So I'm Robbie. I'm going to be talking to you today really quickly about, or not too quickly, but kind of quickly, about youth peer advocacy and the youth peer advocate credential. All right. So when we are looking to recruit YPAs to fill these positions, I feel like so often we're just sending out mass emails and hoping that we're going to find a qualified candidate or someone who is interested in applying for these kinds of positions. Something that we have found is that if we want to interact with young people, we need to go where young people are on a regular basis. So that might be colleges, utilizing social media like Instagram or Facebook, going to libraries or community centers. Job coaching agencies are also great. Or even if you're just going into the community and leaving flyers about or job postings in certain coffee shops where young people might be, or going to schools, handing them out to colleges, just going where the young people are in general. The one thing that I would say is most important when we are trying to target these young adults in youth spaces is to make sure that we are broadcasting the age requirement. So they have to be between the ages of 18 and 30. We can't hire someone who is 17 years old because they wouldn't be eligible to bill Medicaid for their service. And they have to have those lived experience requirements, which we will go over in just a moment. When we are screening prospective YPAs, again, we want to make sure that they have lived experience navigating a child serving system. We want to make sure that they are comfortable utilizing their lived experience and that they can share that to other young people while acting in the role of a YPA. And they have to be willing to complete the YPA training and credentialing. So going through levels 1 and 2 of the online modules. And if they continued onto their professional credential, that they complete the in-person or the live virtual training, as well as the 5 coaching calls. And then, completing the working experience requirements and the application process. Looking at lived experience, so something that is really unique about the YPA credential is that we look at lived experience in very broad terms. It's not just one system or another. We look at any kind of a system where a young person has been involved in. That can be mental health, juvenile justice, foster care, the healthcare system, criminal justice, someone who has experience with an intellectual or developmental disability and has been utilizing OPWDD services, substance use, anything that has either been traumatic to them or has significantly impacted their life. And in the provisional credential application, we have something called a statement of lived experience. This is where the young person will be able to really broadcast what it is that they have gone through, how that experience has impacted them, and how they plan to utilize that experience to support young people moving forward. So we try not to say like, we can see that, oh yeah, you have experience, or no, you don't have experience. If the young person can identify it and they can exemplify how that has impacted them, we will likely take that into consideration and move on to the next stage of their application process. When looking to onboard YPAs and get them credentialed, I know many places want YPAs to come to the job already having their credential, their provisional at least, and then other places will allow them to have like 6 months to a year to obtain their credential. So I think this is a really good guideline. We've sent out this document multiple times and we'll send it out again in the future. But it's the 6 steps. So the first step is completing that level 1 online training, which is comprised of 7 different modules. After they've completed those 7 modules, they are eligible to apply for their provisional credential. Similar to the adult peer specialist certification, that provisional credential allows them to offer Medicaid billable services. And then that will be eligible for, or that will be valid for 18 months before they will then have to complete the level 2 training, both online and virtual or live over Zoom, and 5 coaching calls before they can apply for their professional credential. The only caveat, or not caveat, but the other component for obtaining their professional credential is that they have to have at least 600 hours of working experience. And we have a document called the working experience form, where their supervisor will sign off that they have worked from this period to that period. They have worked a minimum of 600 hours, or they can specify exactly how many hours they have worked. Maybe it's 1,000, 2,000, whatever that may be. And they'll just sign off on it. And then that will count to display that they have worked a minimum of 600 hours. Just really quickly looking through the differentials between the provisional and professional credentials. Needed for provisional, we have lived experience, level 1 training. You have to be between the ages of 18 and 30 years old. Once somebody turns 31 years old, they are no longer eligible to offer Medicaid billable youth peer services. And you can't offer Medicaid billable services if you are under the age of 18. You have to have at least a high school diploma or a GED. You need 2 letters of recommendation. Those can come from peers, from colleagues, coworkers, anyone other than family members or service providers. So we wouldn't accept a recommendation letter from a young person's psychiatrist or psychologist or anything like that. We need a signed code of ethics, and then that again will be valid for 18 months. Professional, they have level 2, both online and virtual. Only need 1 letter of recommendation from their direct supervisor, those 600 hours, again, the signed code of ethics, and then they will have the application, which is very similar to the provisional credential. That will be valid for 2 years, and then every 2 years, they have to document at least 20 hours of continuing ed with a minimum of 2 hours of DEI-related training. Sorry, I went through that really quick. I want to hand it over to Carrie Ann to talk about the FPAs, and then we'll talk a little bit about the hiring toolkits in just a moment.
Thank you, Robbie. So I'm Carrie Ann Royer. I'm the Director of Workforce Development and Training at Families Together in New York State. and I am a family peer advocate for about 8 years. I have 3 children that qualify me for my lived experience. And as they were growing up, I struggled with the children's services and navigating them. I didn't have a family peer advocate that I worked with, didn't even know that that service existed. And I was also watching my children struggle with, just in their own element and not having those supports and those services that they very much needed and deserved. I came into the family peer advocate position because I was very passionate about trying to support as many families that were struggling as I was and give them that support that I didn't have at the time that I very much needed it. Okay, so Families Together New York State is the credentialing entity for the Family Peer Advocate credential. We oversee the credentialing process as well as the required trainings for the credential. And we're going to talk about some tips. So very similar to the adult and the youth peer, when you're recruiting for family peer advocates, we have found that going above and beyond the normal places that you might post a job ad is very beneficial. Going to those places where parents frequent, pediatrician offices, schools, PTAs, social media, libraries, community centers, and being sure that when you are advertising for a family peer advocate position, that you are highlighting that lived experience requirement. When you're screening for a potential family peer advocate, you want to be sure that they have that lived experience navigating systems and services for their child. They need to be willing to share their lived experience with parents and caregivers within their role as an FPA. And they also need to be willing to complete all of the FPA training and credentialing steps so that their service can be Medicaid billable. If at any point you're not sure if a potential potential candidate has the eligibility for the FPA credential, feel free to reach out to us and we will field those questions. So making sure that they have the lived experience, what does that mean? So a FPA can be a parent, either a biological parent, foster parent, or adoptive parent, or a primary caregiver of a child or youth that has significant social, emotional, developmental, medical, substance use, and or behavioral disabilities that manifest itself prior to the age of 21. So just like the youth peer advocate, the systems that we're talking about with lived experience are very broad. And the manifestation of the disability or developmental, or the diagnosis does need to manifest before the age of 21. However, if somebody would like to apply whose child is older than 21, that is fine as long as that child's struggles were before the age of 21. And when we're talking about a caregiver, that's the person who is primarily responsible for the day-to-day care of the child. So we make sure that that definition is broad so that we're giving those opportunities to include those non-traditional family arrangements. Okay. When you're onboarding a family peer advocate, you want to make sure that they are aware of and know how to access the 6 steps to becoming a professional FPA. The first step that they'll need to do is to complete the level 1 online training and apply for their provisional credential. And as Robbie said, with the youth peer, the family peer advocate provisional credential does allow them to bill for the Medicaid services. And it is valid for 18 months. They'll then need to move on to completing the level 2 online training, as well as the live virtual Zoom training and the coaching calls that come after the virtual training. And then they are welcome to apply for their professional credential. Access to everything that they need, frequently asked questions, documents, and the applications can be found on the Families Together website. And any questions that you or an FPA that you hired may have, you're free to email us at fpacredential@ftnys.org, and we will answer your questions. The provisional credential, they need that lived experience and the level 1 training. They have to be at least 18 years old, and they have to at least have a high school diploma or equivalent. We do have an education waiver for eligible candidates, which would be signed by their supervisor stating that maybe they did not completely finish high school, but they have the skills that are needed to do the job. 2 letters of recommendation. Again, they they cannot be from a family member, friends, or their supervisor. And they also, if they are working as an FPA, the letters cannot be written by any families that they are working with or have worked with in the past. That statement of lived experience, which is the most important part of the application, speaks to them answering questions about the advocacy that they provided on behalf of their child, the struggles that their child exhibited during their childhood, and how they're going to use their lived experience to support caregivers. They have to sign our code of ethics, and again, it's valid for 18 months. When they move on to the professional credential, they need to have that level 2 online training and the virtual training, which includes the coaching calls. The letter of recommendation is required from the supervisor, and they have to document at least 1,000 hours, which can be combined through different positions, different jobs, including paid jobs and voluntary jobs, as long as the work they were doing was family peer support services. Again, they'll sign the code of ethics, and it's valid for 2 years, and they'll have to renew that with showing 20 hours of continued education, including a few hours of DEI training. And here's our contact information. If anybody would like to reach out, my family peer advocate credentials would be myself, and any questions about the youth peer advocate credential would be for Robbie. And we're going to talk a little bit about our hiring toolkits for both FPAs and YPAs. When you go into the CTAC, which is where these are housed in the CTAC website, these are what the courses look like. We have Family Peer Advocate Hiring Toolkit and the Youth Peer Advocate Hiring and Support Toolkit. So you'll go to ctacny.org, and at the top you will click on the Self-Learning Center, and then you'll find the toolkits in the course catalog. And once you enroll into them, you will find them in your My Courses tab on the left side of your screen. Robbie will talk a little bit about the youth peer.
All right, thanks, Carrie Ann. One other quick tip, if you are accessing the hiring toolkits for the first time, or if you are logging on to the CTAC LMS for the first time, you will have to create a login and password, and that's just a one-time thing. After you've registered, you won't have to create that again. You'll just have to log in every time that you log in, which I guess makes sense. But all right, so the hiring toolkit is a really comprehensive, I would say it's like a folder of documents and tips and tricks to hiring, recruiting, and retaining YPAs. So we have in the hiring toolkit, the level 1 online training that is also included in the YPA supervisors track on the LMS. We have a plethora of different resources regarding hiring. I'm looking at how to screen for YPAs when we are interviewing them, what questions we should be asking, when or after we have interviewed, like what are some topics that we want to check back on and make sure that the YPA has met all of those demands. And then it also has different tips and tricks on how to creatively recruit YPAs, being that it is a pretty small population of individuals who are qualified to act in these roles. We then have a lot of different opportunities to learn about different training and credentialing requirements, and then other onboarding requirements that are just more like suggestions that you might want to keep track of and keep in mind when working with a YPA after they have been onboarded. We have a lot of different opportunities to learn about supervision and best practices to supervise and retain, as well as supporting young people in these YPA roles. And then more so looking at how we can restructure the organization that we are currently employed at, or how we can create a more inclusive workspace so that the YPAs feel like they are valued within your organization. And then that last bit of resources is anything you can possibly think of. And we are always adding more documents and more resources to the hiring toolkits. So this is just a quick screenshot for one of the YPA screening tools. So for instance, we'll talk about after you have before you have met with them for the initial interview, looking at their resumes, like do they have the necessary experience? Do they meet the education requirements? Have they completed their provisional credential as of yet? Or have they completed their professional or none at all? It's just it's like a general checklist to say like, are they ready or do they have to complete this before they will be ready? And it goes through screening, goes through the interview process, and it goes through the resume, cover letter, individual responses throughout the interview process, etc.
Okay, so in the Family Peer Advocate Hiring Toolkit, there's an explanation of what a Family Peer Advocate role is. It talks about the skills and qualities of an effective FPA, has tips and suggestions for recruiting and hiring. It has setting expectations and screening for an FPA. Has some interviewing documents. There are some interview questions. There's several documents that have different interview questions that you could use as a template. The training and credentialing overview, getting more in depth than what we have been able to do in these webinars. Onboarding new FPAs. There's, again, a checklist to help you to make sure that you're covering everything that is required. And preparing your organization, there's some tips on how to do that and what that would look like. And there's some tips on communicating the role of the FPA to other staff who in your organization who may not be familiar. And there's some retention tips as well. And here is an example of a checklist that we have. We have checklists. We have checklists on job descriptions. There's several examples of job descriptions that you could use and base your job description on. There's recruitment, lots of different documents on how to do that, working with the human resources to write that job posting, making sure that the lived experience is part of that. And there's on application and candidate screening. There's, like Robbie said, there are more, these toolkits are very much kind of a large folder that is full of just about anything that you can think of that is going to include in the, screening and recruiting, hiring, retention areas for FPAs and YPAs. And we are always adding to them, as Robbie had mentioned. Okay, I'm going to pass this over to Cameron.
Thank you, Carrie and Robbie. Hi, everyone. My name is Cameron Farish. I'm someone in mental health recovery and also have my LMSW. I've been in the mental health field working for just over 25 years. 8 of those were as integrated clinical therapist. And now I'm currently the divisional director over all peer services in the behavioral health division at Liberty Resources. I'm also on the board of directors of NIAPRS and on the Peer Tech Advisory Board. And that picture is not that old, but we've gotten a little grayer. So I'm going to be talking about recruiting for adult peer specialists. And just going to talk about some strategies in regards to connecting with the local community for trying to find candidates. Emily touched on this earlier, but having relationships with peer-run, peer-led agencies that are expert in the peer implementation process is really advantageous. Given they have done this and have honed all the skills and processes necessary to hire and retain staff. You also would benefit from connecting with your local peer learning collaborative. I'm a co-founder of the one in the Finger Lakes region, and it's a wonderful place to even come and present your openings, job openings. And it's really, like Emily was saying before, trying to connect with the local peer community. This is a wonderful resource. And then in Western New York, we do have a recovery Facebook group, and I often will post job openings there. I would also recommend, considering the current climate with the workforce in general, that you think about budgeting in hiring bonuses. So some other things that you can do is have a relationship with the local or regional peer training center. And, that's kind of a low-hanging fruit, given the fact that they are training up and coming peers. They're going to have a really good idea of who might be ready for what type of position. And then supporting the workforce growth. How can you do that? So thinking about outpatient mental health clinics, I would suggest that you could ask every therapist on the team to think about identifying any current clients that could be someone who might be interested in being a peer specialist at some point, and then supporting those individuals and exploring what it could be, what it takes, and what a peer specialist does, and then educate on how to get trained, and that would be through the Academy of Peer Services. So I'm just going to share a quick story about myself and my journey to illustrate that process. And my hope is that this could reframe how you think about when someone might be ready for the training. So when I was a clinical therapist, I was years ago helping to develop a local PROS program. Through my journey of the dark nights of the soul, I ended up needing a PROS program myself and received services at a PROS program. And I had not known about Academy of Peer Services. And so the first week in the orientation, in the vocational orientation group, the leader talked about the fact that you can become a peer specialist and the trainings are free and they're online. And I jumped out of that group and ran to the computer lab and signed up and started taking the courses that day. I was in very early recovery at that point in my life, and it truly gave me like meaning, purpose. I found purpose again, and gave me hope that I could come back into the field. So I've shared that story before, and it's been helpful to kind of reframe thinking about how taking the courses could be actually a part of someone's recovery. So how do you attract peer staff? And at that seasoned peer staff, you really want to show that you have competency in the peer model. And competency looks like not just supervision, but the step before that is how you implement each step of creating a peer position, a peer program within your clinic. One really good way to show candidates is having a peer-informed job description. And kind of goes without saying, trying to advocate budget-wise to have above market value pay rate. Let's see. So it's really the first opportunity to show competency in the peer model. And one of the things that I do when I first started at this position was go through all the job postings and edit it to be in the language of recovery. I'm going to throw a couple things in the chat. It's 2 separate links. Hopefully that works. Doesn't look like 2 links, but there are 2 links there, and they're both from Faces and Voices of Recovery. The second link is actually a PDF on what recovery language is. Those are focused a little bit more on the addiction side, but it's still a wonderful introduction or refresher. So you want to, when developing the job posting, you want to create the job responsibilities so that they're aligned with the peer model. Obviously, understanding the peer model in the first place would be a prerequisite. And not only the job responsibilities, but you want to show that you understand what role clarity is and that it's aligned with the fidelity of the peer model. So in short, the easier path and potentially more effective, working smarter, not harder. It's really nationally best practice to subcontract with an agency that specializes in peer support services. And I'd like to hand it off to Rebecca and David. They're going to talk a little bit more about what it looks like to contract for services.
Thank you so much, Cameron. So here I am back with you again, the director of the Wellness Collaborative of New York Independent Practice Association. I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means. And I have David here with me. Are you here? I don't see your video, so I just want to check in.
I'm right here.
Yay, awesome. There you are on my screen now. Thank you, David, for joining me and us today. All right, so I'll jump right in. Cameron, love the intro of saying, what is our easiest path and what's the best practice in hiring, onboarding, recruiting, and retaining peer staff if you don't already have one. It, of course, is to contract with one of the peer-led organizations that have the expertise in that area. So here we are, the Wellness Collaborative. We are that collection of peer-led organizations providing are the experts in support and connections for individuals in need. Our existing services and certified peer specialists can be integrated into your multidisciplinary team to support individuals in a variety of needs. Our peers are skilled in engagement and outreach, offering those options that lead to the hope and healing in their recovery. Can occur in a variety of settings. And they offer that support for moving forward through the treatment program that you as a clinic provider are providing them. They have decades of experience in supporting, training, supervising, and employing those peers, and with fidelity to the peer values. So thinking about, again, I go back to peer-led organizations, every role from those executive leaders, the administration, the finance team, outreach teams, the bridgers, folks who are doing training and education, they are peers who have that lived experience and can bring that to the table. And then, of course, I put in there evidence-based practices that our programs support for individuals. I also love to say, man, we are the originators in screening for, or in other words, having conversations about social determinants of health and coming from a place of a trauma-informed approach. So peers can link those individuals and offer resources for any identified needs of the individuals. I went into this. So what is that peer-run organization? Here we are the pros in offering the supportive services for individuals who receive mental health, have a diagnosis or have services, and then dropped in here those facets of peer services. I would say, from our perspective, that quest in hiring and onboarding is to really reach out to us, connect with the experts who are offering that peer support employment already. Our IPA members are all willing to talk about the offerings in peer support. And that retention of your current or newly onboarded peers as well could greatly benefit from the community that our network of providers offers. The learning collaboratives have come up, those individual support groups and recovery centers as well. Great offerings for any peers at your organization to connect and continue to learn and advance in their skill set, as well as for your clinical team. So that goes across the full spectrum. And of course, my contact info will be in here, but I think this is where I pass to David. This is actually our largest peer-led organization here in New York State is Baltic Street. So take it away, David.
Thank you, Rebecca. David Gross from Baltic Street. I'm the Director of Advocacy Programs for Brooklyn and Staten Island. I applaud Rebecca for the previous slide because it echoed a lot of the things that she was saying in the first slide. I came up with a little kind of acronym APRO, a peer-run organization. So contract with APRO. Peers employed by a pro are trained and certified. Peers are an important part of the care team as they bring lived experience and engage with the recipients of mental health services. Supervision is conducted by a peer for a peer, which allows for mutual support and prevents co-optation. Participant-driven services, nothing for us without us, which is kind of the running motto for peers. Engaging individuals who have not responded to more traditional methods of mental health services, peer support, service expertise. So what is expertise? Peer expertise. Peer expertise refers to the knowledge and experience that individuals with lived experience of mental health challenges possess and can offer to others who are going through similar struggles. Peer experts use their personal experience to provide support, guidance, and understanding to others, often through peer support programs, advocacy, or education. As it's put in the other slide, there were several different support systems and facets. This approach acknowledges the value of shared experience in promoting recovery and well-being and highlights the importance of including people with lived experience in mental health service systems. And here's my plug for Baltic Street. Baltic Street AH Incorporated is committed to providing peer recovery, person-centered, trauma-informed, and compassionate services to those who live with mental health. Our vision is to drive a culture transformation within the mental health community by advocating for the underserved, educating for change, and inspiring wellness. We approach our role with cultural humility and mindfulness of oppressive systems. Baltic Street has 27 years of experience delivering peer services. Currently, we have 17 programs and over 100 full-time/part-time and trainee staff peers. We are now the largest peer agency in New York State, if not the world. I'll check on that fact later. We provide services that span the 8 dimensions of wellness. There's a typo there, but I'll fix that later, which are essential for independent and meaningful life in the community. Oh, and I'll hand it off to Rita.
Thanks so much, David. And I'm going to just ask Rebecca really quickly, because I know we mentioned the IPA. How many peer-run organizations are members of the IPA? Just I lost touch with that recently.
Yeah, that's okay. So we have 12 dedicated programs, and they qualify as a member. And I hate to say qualify, but we really are hold tight to that. It has to be a peer led model. So the board, that leadership structure, staffing have to be a majority made up of peers with that lived experience. So I believe it's about 42 programs currently under OMH have a peer program. So of that, so just to put it in context, the 12 that are current members are peer led.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that date. So, and I'm going to just speak on behalf of one of the other, and thank you, David. The Baltic Street is definitely one of the oldest in the country and one of the largest in the country, and one of the best peer-run organizations. Another one that we work with quite often through the Academy of Peer Services is Hands Across Long Island. And next week at the consultation session, Aviva Cohen is going to come in and talk a little bit about an internship program. Now, many of the peer run and other programs like Howie the Harp is a training organization in New York City that has been doing internships for a very long time. There are many groups that are doing internships. And what Hallie is bringing is kind of a comprehensive look at what an internship can look like, so that it goes from, as we mentioned before, with any of these certifications, if you go from provisional to a full professional certification, there are work hours that are associated with that. And an internship is a great way for people to get those work hours to move from provisional to a full certification. So Aviva is going to come next week to talk about that. And I just wanted to also mention that Families Together has a whole directory of family support programs that include youth peer within that directory. And we've been compiling a directory of the peer run programs so that you'll have that information available to you. The programs are broken down by region. So if you just let us know, you can get the directory yourself and look up different programs in your region. And some of the benefits, I just wanted to reiterate that the benefits of working with either a peer run or a family peer run organization is that you have a network of organizations throughout the state that can create synergy between your program and the peer run organizations. You can ensure that peers have input, buy-in, and guidance on any program design and implementation you're thinking about. Address and acknowledge power differentials between the clinical and the peer staff, because that often is a tension that happens when peers come on board, and the peer run organizations and family peer run organizations can help with that. Also looking at addressing stigma, structural racism, and discrimination throughout the organization. And I noted that there's 2 hours of diversity, equity, and inclusion included in both the youth and family peer organization or peer credentialing. I think that's an incredibly important topic that needs to be addressed throughout. Some of the other benefits are that it elevates the value of peer specialists as trained peer specialists and family peer advocates and youth peer advocates as trained and experienced professionals. Ensures representation by peers at every level of the organization when the collaboration happens well. Measures outcomes that demonstrate recovery and community inclusion. And also, as Cameron mentioned earlier, maintaining fidelity to peer support values and practices. Final plug here, there are also job banks. So if you're recruiting, the Academy of Peer Services has a virtual learning community that I've been involved in for a very long time. We take jobs from employers and send those jobs out to the peer community that are people that have taken courses in the Academy. And Families Together also has a job bank that they have posted on their website and advertise as well. So just a quick wrap up. We may have a little bit of time for questions here at the end. Let me get through this and we'll get to the very end. But if you asked a question and it wasn't answered, we'll be looking through the chat and making sure that we're bringing any unanswered questions to be shared with the presenters next week to be talked about at the consultation session. Just a quick summary, and thank you very much, Emily and Em. Em had to jump off, but Emily and Em, Carrie Ann, Robbie, Cameron, Rebecca, and David, thank you so much for presenting today. Next week is our consultation session for this topic, and we'll hold an interactive consultation session with all of you that are here and anybody who has a chance to review the recording before next week. It'll offer you an opportunity to join a breakout session and ask more questions and learn more about each of the topics that the presenters have talked about. Beyond next week, we have 2 more webinars with associated consultation sessions, creating a culture of successes on March 23rd, with a consultation session the week after on the 30th. And then on April 13th is supervision with a consultation session on April 20th. A reminder, this recording will be posted in 2 to 3 days on the PeerTech website. Continuing education for New York Certified Peer Specialists will be available through the Academy of Peer Services. Right now we have the shelf of this course listed, and if you've watched the webinar, all you need to do is go there, log in, take the test for this particular session, and complete the course evaluation for a certificate of credit. If you are a youth peer advocate or a family peer advocate, just save the email that you received from this event to confirm your attendance and submit that with your application to obtain continuing education for renewal. We have a number of resources that are available. One is a frequently asked question document that we update regularly. For each one of our webinars, we have different resources for the webinar that are specific to the topic, and that will be posted on the PeerTech website. And very important, there's a wonderful document that OMH has spent a lot of time putting together on the guidance for peer support in the clinics. So just wanted to mention that. If you are a clinic leader or a developer of a program within a clinic, we have a survey for you to take. And this is separate from the survey that you'll get as a follow-up to this webinar. This is a survey that you would take by clicking on the link, and there's a survey that you'll answer about your interest in developing a peer program, the things you might need to know more about in developing a peer program, and the kinds of education and technical assistance that you would be looking for. So this is for those of you that are in the middle of developing a peer specialist or a peer services program within your clinic setting. There's a separate survey that will come as part of the follow-up to this webinar that will ask you just, about the how was it, how did we do, and what did you get out of the webinar. And here's the contact information for our presenters, and this will again be in the slides, which will be part of when the recording is posted on the website. You'll also be able to get the slides, and the contact information for each of today's presenters will be listed there. And here's the information to contact us. So what I'd like to do now is just thank our sponsors, first of all, at the Office of Mental Health, the Office of Advocacy and Peer Support Services, and all of the dedicated people at OMH who have paved the way for peer support to be included in clinic settings and to create this technical assistance center to help make that happen well. If you have questions, their guidance document that I shared a minute ago provides a wealth of information on how to get started. We also want to thank our partners who contributed to the development of training and technical assistance. And this series is just the beginning. There's many groups with a lot of passion who are interested in investing in the successful inclusion, and I'll use Emily's term, immersion of peer support in the clinical environments. So today's presenters, Robbie, Carrie Ann, Emily, Rebecca, David, Em, Cameron. I just want to thank you all. And joining us next week will be Helen Skipper, Marie Lewison, and Aviva Cohen for part of the consultation session. Thank you all. And I just really want to thank our partners here at McSilver, particularly Yvette Kelly, Andy Cleek, Lydia Franco, Ann Kuppinger, Connor McCollum, Angelique Rodriguez, Amber Martinez, and our Peer Services, Academy of Peer Services team, Amy Spagnolo, Matthew McDonald, Barsha Comet, and our newest team member, Marie Vogel. And especially, I would like to thank all of you for attending, and we hope to see you again next week and in future sessions with PeerTech. And I just want to take a look at the time. Oh my goodness, we have a little bit of time left. If anybody has questions, why don't I allow Matthew, if you have any questions that we might as a panel want to address in these last few minutes, let's go for it.
Hi, Rita. I would welcome anyone who wants to put additional questions into the chat to do so at this time. We will get to them either contemporaneously, immediately upon your request, or we can carry some of these questions into the consultation session next week.
So are there any questions we can answer right now?
I think there's a lot of positive feedback coming from the chat over the course of the webinar, but the questions have been fairly limited. You had answered one about halfway through the webinar about certification, experience required for certification for New York peer specialists, and for that certification, or rather that experience to need to be documented by supervisors. And otherwise, we do not have a question ready to go, Rita.
Okay, well, do any of my panelists, presenters have anything you might want to add based on what we've talked about today? We've got just about 5 minutes left. I definitely want to put in a big plug, going back through our presenters for the NIAPRS Core Navigator program. Emily, do you have a minute that you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Rita, it looks like there has just been a comment about the 2,000-hour requirement.
Correct. Actually made a note which was interesting, because there's the comparison between there's 1,000 hours for the family, there's 600 hours for the youth, and there's 2,000 hours for the adult. When the adult certification was being put together, and this is my recollection, and actually Matthew, you might know better than I do, 2,000 hours equated to 1 year of work experience, and there was a real concern that there be a solid amount of work experience before someone was considered actually certified. Does that ring a bell for you, Matthew?
So the 2,000 hours of work experience, it does reflect approximately 1 year of full-time work. And I think some of the misconception or misperception about the 2,000 hours is that someone would need that in order to be billable for services, which is not true. Someone is billable for services upon acquiring a provisional certification. So the 2,000 hours is something that's encouraged for people to strive toward, but that could take place over 2 years of part-time work. And I see Cameron, you're raising your hand if you'd like to jump in.
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt, but I was going to piggyback off of what you were sharing, and I think that clarification is really important. As someone who has been hiring and training and onboarding other peer specialists for years, I would also say that having the certification is the tip of the iceberg. It introduces you to all the concepts, and it's very enriching, and it's necessary. But you really, and I learned this from Rita years ago, there's a difference between learning concepts and being able to put concepts and principles into practice. And so really the 2,000 hours, as someone who, you know, from my perspective, is imperative in learning how to put these concepts into skill set. So just wanted to speak to
Yeah.
that.
And that kind of goes along with what we're going to be talking about more in the consultation session. They couldn't be here today, but the whole idea of internships. You know, so often people learning a profession have to go through some kind of a process in order to develop their skills. And internships are a great way to do that. So if an organization, if a program can offer an internship, especially in partnership with a peer-run organization, that's one way in which they can gain the additional work hours towards the full certification if that's something that's needed or desired. Yep.
Yeah, and I think this is a great segue to the next webinar on supervision.
Yeah.
Because it really takes a supervisor who is knowledgeable and preferably deeply knowledgeable and skilled around the peer model in order to support newer staff, younger experienced staff, and how to not only be aligned in the fidelity of the practice of providing peer support services, but to continue to hone their skills.
Thanks, Cameron.
Yeah.
So we've got about 2 minutes, and these last 2 minutes, again, I just want to thank our presenters for today. And I want to thank everyone at OMH who has made this center and this series possible. I want to thank everybody who came, and especially our expert panel. And everybody on this panel has a great deal of expertise, and I'm so happy they were able to share it with you today. So with that, I think I'm going to say thanks for being here.